I always said Mason had Claire's eyes. When he was a baby, everyone pointed it out, those soft green flecks, the way his lashes curled like hers. I said it proudly, like any new dad. But when he turned 11, something shifted. The shape was still familiar, but the soul behind them? It didn't look back at me the way I expected. There was distance. A kind of inherited silence that didn't come from me or Claire. It was a small thing. A flicker, really. But it stuck. I've always been the quiet one between us. Claire is the social one, the light in every room, the woman people gather around. Our neighbors loved her. Her co-workers adored her. At parent-teacher meetings, other dads gave me those you lucked out glances like I didn't already know. I did. She was dazzling. At least, she used to be. When we first got together, it was fast. Claire and I had known each other in college, but we reconnected at a 4th of July party 6 years later. She was already pregnant, just barely showing. She said the guy had disappeared, and that she wasn't going to chase anyone to raise her child. I respected that. I stepped in. And when Mason was born, I put my name on the birth certificate without blinking. We married 3 months later. Looking back, I see the problem. I mistook momentum for love. It's easy to overlook things when you're building a life. Mortgages, daycare, groceries, the noise of living drowns out the questions you don't want answers to. I told myself timing didn't matter. Mason was mine. I was there for the first steps, the fevers, the scraped knees. That's what makes a father, right? But that seed of doubt, it never really died. It just buried itself under years of routine. Then came the night of Claire's dad's birthday. We were at a small Italian place, a family favorite. Claire was glowing, as usual, laughing too loudly at her own jokes. Mason sat beside her, twirling spaghetti and zoning out. Lily, our youngest, had climbed onto my lap to escape her vegetables. Claire's parents were across the table, her mom drinking rose, her dad nursing scotch like it was medicine. I didn't notice at first, but Claire's father was staring at Mason. Long, quiet looks. The kind people give when they're calculating something they shouldn't be. After dessert, he leaned across the table, his breath sour with liquor and regret, and muttered something so low it barely landed. "That boy's not yours, never was." It was barely audible. But it hit like a gunshot in a church. I laughed it off in the moment, a drunk old man talking nonsense. But his face said otherwise. No smile. Just resignation. Like he'd been carrying it around too long. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Claire, listening to her breathe, trying to quiet the storm unraveling inside my chest. I kept staring at the ceiling, thinking back over the years. To Mason's first birthday. To the way Claire used to hesitate when talking about her pregnancy. The sudden push for marriage. All the timelines started to line up, or unravel. I didn't confront her. Not yet. There's something about betrayal that makes you want confirmation before you let yourself feel it. So I started watching. I went through old photos on her social media. Not the curated ones, the ones buried deep, the ones she thought no one would scroll far enough to find. And there he was. Ethan Klein. College boyfriend. Amateur photographer. Drummer. The guy she used to call a beautiful mistake. They had been dating the spring before Mason was born. I compared dates. Mason was born in February. Claire and I reconnected that July. Mason's due date didn't match up with what I'd been told. I kept digging. Claire had scrubbed a lot, but not everything. Some emails were still synced on the old iPad we gave Mason. That's when I found the messages. Not many, she was careful. But enough to paint a picture. Birthday wishes. Check-ins. And one photo. Ethan and Mason, side by side at a diner. No tags. Just the caption, same grin. That one broke me. It wasn't the intimacy, not exactly. It was the familiarity. The way Mason leaned into him. The same way he used to lean into me before he got too old for affection. I should have been furious, but mostly I felt hollow. Everything I thought I was building had cracks running straight through it. And I started to question everything. Not just the paternity. But the whole idea of us. Claire was always smiling, always present. But there were signs I hadn't wanted to see. The way she avoided talking about the past. The private phone I once thought was for work. The hidden credit card she claimed was for emergencies. There were lies. I knew it now. I just didn't know how deep they went. The next morning, I looked at Mason over breakfast. He asked if I'd take him to the science fair next week. His eyes lit up when he talked about his project, a volcano that spewed real smoke. He was excited. Innocent. And I realized something brutal, none of this was his fault. But it didn't make it hurt less. Something had shifted inside me, not anger, not yet. Just the quiet, searing realization that I had been living someone else's life. That I had been cast as a father and husband in a play I didn't audition for. And Claire. She'd been the director all along. I didn't know what I was going to do. Not yet. But I knew one thing for certain. I would never unsee the truth again. Not in her eyes. And definitely not in his. There's a moment, just before someone lies, where they pause. It's not long. Just a breath, the slightest delay as they weigh the cost of the truth. Claire had that breath the morning everything cracked. She was in the kitchen, barefoot, stirring sugar into her coffee like nothing in the world was off balance. Her robe hung perfectly, makeup half done, that habitual smile already on her lips like armor. But I wasn't playing my usual role anymore. I wasn't asking about her day or kissing her forehead goodbye. I just stood there, quiet, letting the weight between us settle like dust. That was all it took. She folded. No fireworks. No screaming match. No grand confession. Just the slow, shaking acknowledgement that everything I feared had been real all along. Mason wasn't mine. Not biologically, anyway. She had slept with Ethan, one last time, she said, a week before she ran into me that summer. She found out about the pregnancy a month before the wedding. It should have stopped everything, but instead it fueled her urgency. She told herself I'd be the better choice. More stable. More present. More father than the real one ever would be. As if that made it okay. I stood there, numb, hearing words that rewrote the last decade of my life. She justified it all with this strange calm, like she'd rehearsed the speech in her head 1,000 times for a moment she never actually thought would come. Her eyes looked at me like they expected understanding. Forgiveness. Maybe even relief. But I said nothing. Not a single word. Just turned and walked away. I packed a bag that afternoon. Clothes, toiletries, Lily's favorite blanket. I didn't tell Claire where I was going. Didn't slam the door or leave a note. I simply scooped up Lily from her nap and left. Quiet. Clean. Final. She called twice. I didn't answer. She didn't call again after that. I found a month-to-month rental outside town. A small 2-bedroom with peeling paint and creaky floors, but it was enough. Lily adjusted quickly, as kids do. She was too young to understand, but she sensed the shift. She clung to me more, woke up at night calling for me. I was always there. Unlike Claire. That week, I ordered 2 DNA kits. One for Mason. One for Lily. I didn't need the confirmation anymore, but I needed the record. Something undeniable. Cold, factual, and beyond the reach of Claire's spinning logic. The results came back exactly as I expected. Mason, no match. Lily, 99.9% certainty. Mine. It was a strange kind of relief. Not happiness. Not vindication. Just clarity. Like waking from a long, vivid dream into a darker, quieter reality. Claire had lied. Over and over. Not just about Mason. About the foundation of our marriage, the truth of her choices, the role she asked me to play without ever letting me see the script. But the betrayal wasn't what hit the hardest. It was the intention behind it. She hadn't just made a mistake and buried it out of shame. She'd made a decision. A calculated one. She chose me not because she loved me, but because I fit the mold. The dependable husband. The provider. The father figure she could hand a child to and wash her hands of the consequences. Every memory I thought was rooted in love began to shift under that light. Our wedding, rushed, but romantic. The night Mason first called me Dad. The way she always dodged questions about the early days of her pregnancy. I replayed every scene, looking for signs I'd missed, cracks I'd glossed over. They were everywhere. I just hadn't wanted to see them. The Cold War began in silence. No custody threats. No legal ambushes. Just distance and strategy. I spent hours with lawyers, outlining my case. I made sure everything was documented, timelines, transactions, evidence. I wasn't going to scream or beg or demand. I was going to dismantle the lie with precision. Claire, for her part, tried to maintain the illusion. She kept posting photos, throwbacks of happier days, smiling shots of the kids, carefully cropped images that suggested normalcy. But the mask had slipped. Her smile no longer looked natural. It looked practiced. Desperate. I dug deeper. The financial discrepancies started to surface. Bank statements didn't line up. There were withdrawals she couldn't explain. Payments to accounts I didn't recognize. A second credit card under her maiden name, used mostly in cash-heavy transactions, restaurants, hotels, gifts. Some charges were tied to cities where Ethan had recently posted photos from. The trail was clumsy, but it was there. She wasn't just lying about the past. She was still lying, actively, audaciously. And all the while, she acted like I was the one who abandoned her. Like I was the one who walked out on our family. That narrative worked well for a while. Friends messaged, confused. Some even accused me of leaving Claire during a rough patch. I didn't fight it. Not yet. I let her dig the hole herself. Every day I looked at Lily and felt that familiar ache, the one that used to be love. It had been replaced now with something else, duty. A fire that kept me moving, kept me planning. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. She took 10 years from me. She built a fantasy world on my back, molded me into the father she needed while protecting the man who gave her the one thing she lied to my face about, and she did it with a smile. That smile, the same one I used to find charming now made my stomach turn. It wasn't real. It never had been. It was just a mask she wore until it cracked under the weight of its own lies. The game had changed. Claire didn't know it yet. She still thought I was the man who smiled through betrayal. Who tucked doubt into his pocket and came home anyway. But that man was gone. She left him behind the moment she chose silence over truth. And I was about to show her what the other version of me looked like. The one who doesn't stay silent. The one who doesn't play her game. The one she should have feared from the start. It's strange how easy it is to become invisible when people think you're broken. After I left, Claire assumed the worst, that I was spiraling, grieving, punishing myself for walking away. And I let her believe that. I stayed quiet, absent from the spaces we used to share. The texts she sent were spaced further apart each week, growing more desperate in tone. At first they were laced with confusion, then guilt, and finally hope. Hope that I would come back. That I still loved her enough to forgive it all. That I was the man who had once chosen her, pregnancy and all, without flinching. But she never realized the man she married was done playing the fool. I was never coming back. I was only circling. Closer. Quieter. She didn't know I was watching from the edges, moving with intent. My lawyers built the legal side of things, custody motions, asset tracking, financial audits. But my war wasn't in court. Not yet. First, I needed information. Claire thought my distance was a wound she could bandage. She invited me over one afternoon, under the guise of talking about Mason. I said yes. I smiled. I played the role. While she sipped wine and recited emotional half-truths, I watched her laptop screen over her shoulder. Took note of passwords typed too casually. Grabbed the forgotten tablet Mason used for games and synced it to my account. Her digital trail opened up with shocking ease. In that space between smiles and small talk, I slipped inside her world. Emails. Transactions. Files. It was all there. Not just the emotional betrayal, the photo albums, the saved chats with Ethan, the dated memories she couldn't bring herself to delete, but the financial ones. She'd been siphoning money for years. Not much at a time, never enough to raise flags. But it added up. Discreet transfers to an account in her maiden name. Notes labeled as health expenses or Mason's allergy therapy. I followed the trail. Some payments landed in Ethan's account directly. Others went to services near his apartment, rent deposits, school donations, even a payment for photography gear. It wasn't just betrayal. It was embezzlement. She had taken everything, not just my trust, but my income, my security, my name, and used it to build a private world that excluded me entirely. She wasn't just protecting a lie. She was funding it. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not rage. Not sorrow. But clarity. I was done mourning. The plan came together slowly. Deliberately. First, I copied the files. Every bank statement, every photo, every email that confirmed her relationship with Ethan and her misuse of funds. I put them in a hard drive, physical, offline, safe. Then I started packaging them. Not for the police. Not yet. First, for the people Claire feared most, the ones who believed she was perfect. Her company prided itself on integrity, high-end client services where discretion was king. I uploaded a zipped folder to a burner email and sent it to HR, posing as a concerned client. Subject line: before you renew her contract, you should see this. Her yoga group came next, full of mothers who wore perfection like a badge. I leaked screenshots of Claire's chats with Ethan, complete with time-stamped messages sent while she claimed to be busy with the kids. And the piece de resistance? A compilation of Claire referring to Mason's father as the real one, while making me out to be the fallback. Subtle. Cutting. And then the school board. It wasn't about revenge. It was about exposure. I wanted her world to feel as unstable as mine had. I wanted the image she so carefully curated, the happy mother, the selfless wife, to disintegrate under its own dishonesty. Slowly. Publicly. She didn't see it coming. The fallout began with silence. Her company restructured her position within a week. Her yoga group chats went dormant, then vanished. Other parents stopped responding to her posts. I stayed off social media, but I checked the corners where her reputation once thrived. She was a ghost in her own curated life. Then I sent her one final letter. No return address. No emotion. Just the results of Mason's DNA test paperclip to a short, printed note. You told me Mason was mine. He's not. But Lily is. I'm coming for her. Everything else, you can keep. For now. She must have read it a dozen times, trying to decipher what it meant. Trying to guess what came next. But that was the beauty of it, it wasn't a warning. It was the consequence. After that, I disappeared. Not physically, I still dropped Lily off at school, still picked her up with a smile. Still lived in the small rental where her drawings filled the fridge and her stuffed animals claimed the couch. But I removed myself from Claire's narrative entirely. She couldn't reach me. Not through friends. Not through family. She couldn't twist my silence into guilt anymore. The cracks in her mask began to show. One of her friends reached out, not to defend her, but to quietly apologize. Said she'd seen the emails. Said Claire had tried to spin it all, but her story didn't hold up. Another friend said Claire had stopped showing up to the usual playdates, claiming illness. It wasn't illness. It was collapse. She was unraveling, one reputation at a time. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The final blow hadn't landed. That would come soon, in a courtroom, under oath, in front of a judge who wouldn't care about charm or smiles or curated lies. This wasn't just about winning. It was about erasing the lie completely, legally, socially, emotionally. Claire thought I was gone. But I wasn't gone. I was just loading the next round. The courthouse smelled like sweat and copy paper and the kind of cologne people wear when they're pretending to be something they're not. Claire wore a gray suit that looked like it belonged to a politician's wife, sharp lines, high heels, every strand of hair in place. She looked ready for war. But her eyes told a different story. Tired. Thin. The beginning of cracks. I hadn't seen her in person since the day I walked out with Lily. Months of silence had passed between us, and now here we were, separated by rows of oak benches and legal briefs, about to dismantle whatever was left of the version of us she'd sold to the world. She came with a full legal team, 2 attorneys, a paralegal, and that same fragile smile she always used when she didn't know what came next. Her case was simple, I was the problem. She painted a portrait of abandonment. Claimed I left without notice, emotionally distant, prone to instability. She said the war changed me. That I was cold, uncommunicative. Dangerous, even. She brought up an old panic attack I had years ago and tried to twist it into a meltdown. Her lawyers quoted therapy journals and military studies like they were scripture, piecing together a narrative built on my silence. But all I had to do was wait. Because I had the truth. The kind of truth that doesn't need drama to land, just a judge in a quiet room. When it was my turn, my lawyer handed over the DNA test. Neatly printed, notarized, undeniable. The judge glanced at the name, then at Mason's birthdate, then at Claire. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She just folded. For a second, I thought it might be over. I thought this was the twist. The unraveling of her empire in one breath. But the real twist was still waiting behind courtroom doors, in a sealed envelope my lawyer received just before we were dismissed for the day. Ethan Klein had filed a motion for partial custody. Not visitation. Not shared decision-making. Custody. It hit like a punch to the sternum. Not because I didn't expect him to appear at some point, but because of what it meant. Mason, who hadn't asked for any of this, was now a pawn between 2 men he barely knew. One biological. One present. Neither hole in his eyes anymore. Claire hadn't even told Ethan about the custody case. But someone must have tipped him off. Maybe she reached out in desperation. Maybe he saw the house of cards crumbling and figured it was time to stake a claim. It didn't matter. What mattered was the look in Mason's eyes when he was called to speak to the court-appointed counselor. He didn't cry. He didn't say a word at all. He just stared straight ahead, face hollow, jaw clenched. He was watching adults fight over pieces of his life, none of them listening to what he needed most. That's when I made my decision. I withdrew my claim for the house. Every room, every wall in that place was soaked in Claire's deception. Let them keep it. Let them argue over mortgage payments and furniture splits. I didn't care. The house was never mine. Not really. All I wanted was Lily. My daughter. My blood. My responsibility. The court granted me primary custody without protest. Claire didn't fight it. Not after the test. Not after the reports. She looked like someone already losing a game she couldn't understand. Her strategy had failed. Her leverage vanished. I could have left it there. I could have let her drift into obscurity, let Ethan have his sliver of Mason's life, and built a quiet new world with my daughter in peace. But there was one last card in my deck. A video. It had been recorded months ago. One of those late nights when Claire forgot her phone was still paired to the tablet Mason played with. The camera had been left running by accident. But her voice? Clear. Relaxed. Unfiltered. She was speaking to someone, likely a friend, and laughing in that high, casual tone she always used when she felt clever. Of course Mason isn't his. But Lucas? He'd die for that kid. That's why I picked him. The arrogance in her voice still curdled my stomach. Not because of the lie itself, but because of the intent behind it. I had been selected. Not loved. Not chosen. Used. So I posted it. Not out of spite. Out of precision. I uploaded the clip to a quiet burner account. Sent it to a few forums where people told their stories, cheating, betrayal, custody warfare. It went viral in hours. I never added a name. Never showed a face. But people figured it out. Those who knew Claire recognized the voice. Those who didn't, filled in the blanks with their own pain. And the court of public opinion? It judged swiftly. Within a week, her job sent out a statement. Her professional accounts vanished. The moms groups that used to fawn over her blocked her profile. Even the school started reviewing Mason's placement due to family instability. I didn't celebrate. There was no joy in watching someone unravel. Only the cold satisfaction of justice. But in the end, it wasn't really about punishment. It was about Mason. Because as much as Claire had hurt me, she'd hurt him more. She'd taken a boy and built his world on lies, and now he had to live in the rubble. I couldn't fix that. I couldn't give him back what he lost. But I could stop pretending. And the truth, finally unburied, was the sharpest knife of all. Some storms don't start with thunder. They start with silence, the kind of silence that settles over a life when the lies can no longer hold it up. Claire's world didn't collapse all at once. It caved in slow, like a decaying ceiling above a bed you used to feel safe under. One day, she was the picture of control, polished, professional, surrounded by praise. The next, she was being quietly pushed out of meetings, her name scrubbed from company directories, her face missing from the website banner she once posed for. The video hadn't named her, but it didn't need to. Those who knew, knew. And once people start connecting dots, they don't stop until the whole picture's on fire. Her clients stopped returning emails. Her inbox flooded with quiet unfollows and unsubscribes. Parents at the school stopped waving at pickup. Women she used to gossip with in yoga class began crossing the street to avoid her. The curated social life she had built, house by house, lie by lie, fell apart with surgical precision. Not because I orchestrated it. I just let the truth breathe. And truth has a funny way of turning allies into ghosts. Ethan didn't stick around either. As soon as his name started appearing in the same breath as custody, responsibility, child support, he vanished. Moved across the country, blocked numbers, closed accounts. Whatever promise he'd made to Claire, if there had ever been one, was gone with the last airport gate call. Mason was the collateral. I didn't hear from Claire directly at first. Just secondhand whispers. A friend of hers reached out to a friend of mine, asking if I'd heard anything. Said Claire was struggling. Said Mason had been missing classes. That he'd started skipping meals. That Claire had begun locking her bedroom door at night, afraid her own son might explode. Then one morning, my phone lit up with her number. I didn't answer. The voicemail came 10 minutes later. Choppy, panicked, soaked in tears. Mason was gone. Left during the night. No note. No backpack. Just disappeared. She begged for help, begged for understanding, begged for me. I deleted the message without listening to the end. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. She wasn't calling for Mason. She was calling for rescue, from herself, from consequence, from a decade of dishonest choices finally circling back like crows over a graveyard. But Mason? Mason was still a kid. Still stuck inside a war he didn't start. Still carrying the wreckage of what his mother built and his biological father abandoned. And he was out there, somewhere. So I went looking. The police weren't much help. They'd taken a report, but a teenage boy leaving home after months of legal chaos didn't trigger any alarms. So I did what fathers do. I retraced steps. Old parks. The bridge near school. The gas station down by the train tracks, where I once caught him sneaking sodas behind Claire's back. That's where I found him. It was raining. The kind of slow, cold drizzle that seeps through your jacket and chills your bones. The station lights were off. A flickering neon sign buzzed uselessly above the awning. And there, beneath it, sat Mason. His hoodie soaked through. Knees pulled to his chest. Eyes hollow in a way no 11-year-old should ever be. He didn't run when he saw me. He didn't speak. He just broke. His face crumpled, shoulders shaking with years of held-in confusion and betrayal. He collapsed into me like he had nowhere else in the world to go. And in that moment, every plan I had made, every wall I had built to protect myself from this pain, it all dissolved. Because this wasn't about Claire anymore. It wasn't about Ethan, or courts, or revenge. It was about a boy who had been told half-truths his entire life, and the only man who'd ever stood between him and the void. We sat there for a long time, under the hum of the broken light, soaked in rain and silence. His words came eventually, through stuttered breaths and chattering teeth. Words about feeling lost, about feeling unwanted, about being afraid that he was just a mistake passed from one adult to another. And then came the words that gutted me. That I had always been his dad. That he didn't care about blood. That he didn't want to lose the only version of family that had ever felt real. I didn't respond right away. There was no need. I just wrapped my arms around him and held on. Soaking wet. Heart shattered. Full of sorrow, fury, and something else I hadn't felt in months, love. I made a choice that night. Not for revenge. Not for closure. For redemption. Not for me, but for him. For Lily. For whatever pieces of a future I could still give them. We went home. Not to the old house. To our home. The small rental where nothing was polished, but everything was honest. Mason dried off in a towel 3 sizes too small. Lily ran to him like nothing had changed. And maybe, for a moment, it hadn't. I contacted my lawyer the next morning. The paperwork for guardianship would begin immediately. Claire wouldn't fight it. Not anymore. She had already lost. But this wasn't a victory. It was the beginning of something new. Something earned. Mason had run from the wreckage of lies, and somehow, he'd run back to me. And I would never, ever let him down again. The courthouse looked different the second time around. Same pillars. Same echoing hallways. But this time, I didn't walk in with uncertainty clinging to my shoulders like a wet coat. This time, I carried purpose. This time, I came for everything. The petition was clear: full custody of both children. No more half measures. No more playing roles Claire had written. I wasn't stepping into her world anymore. I was ending it. Claire showed up wearing defeat. The suit was still tailored, but the fabric sagged in places that hadn't before. Her hair was tidy but dull, her makeup struggling to mask the shadows under her eyes. She tried to keep her composure, but she wasn't fooling anyone, not the judge, not her lawyer, not even herself. There was no crowd this time. No sea of curious spectators. Just a quiet courtroom and the weight of decisions years in the making. Her team shuffled through papers, whispered tactics already hollowed out by the truth. Her case was cracked before it even hit the desk. She tried to fight. Tried to pivot the narrative back to victimhood. Brought up her struggles, her trauma, the pressure she was under when she made her choices. But her words felt like static against the clean, undeniable weight of evidence. The video was the first nail. The judge watched the clip in silence. Her voice, those words, careless, arrogant, cruel, they filled the room. And with each sentence, the illusion she'd clung to shriveled. Then came the financial records. The misused accounts. The disguised payments. The backdoor deals with Ethan. My lawyer laid it all out with surgical precision, each piece of evidence a quiet cut. The lies. The manipulation. The abandonment. By the time the judge spoke, Claire wasn't pleading anymore. She was shrinking. The ruling landed like thunder in a church. Full custody granted to Lucas Grant. Claire Harper to be awarded supervised visitation, monthly, pending review. No gasps. No tears. Just silence. Claire didn't make a sound when the gavel fell. She stood slowly, like her limbs had forgotten how to bear her weight. Her lawyer muttered something in her ear, but she didn't respond. Her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her papers. But her eyes never met mine. Not until the parking lot. She was waiting near the back, beside her scratched sedan. Rain had started to fall, the kind that feels like tiny needles tapping against your skin. Her mascara was already streaked. Her voice was hoarse from 1,000 things left unsaid. She looked at me like a woman staring at her own reflection in broken glass. She said I'd ruined her. And I stood there, dry, steady, watching the woman who built a world on fiction finally realize that the price of deception isn't just pain. It's permanence. I didn't respond with cruelty. I didn't raise my voice or offer sympathy. There was nothing left to say. Because I hadn't destroyed her life. She had. I just stopped pretending it was real. And then I turned away. The new house was modest. Clean. 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, a backyard just wide enough for a swing set and a patch of untamed wildflowers. The walls were empty at first, but they didn't stay that way. Mason and Lily filled them, photos of pumpkin patches, museum trips, game nights. The kind of moments that meant nothing to the world but everything to us. Mason changed. Slowly, then all at once. The guarded stiffness in his shoulders eased. The hollow silence he used to carry began to fade. He laughed more. Not performative laughter, but real, unfiltered bursts that shook the walls and made Lily squeal with joy. We were rebuilding something. Not a family Claire had designed. But a new one. Honest. Earned. Then the envelope came. No return address, but I recognized her handwriting immediately. Inside, a single page. Folded neatly. No flourish. No apology. Just one final story. She claimed Mason wasn't Ethan's after all. That she had lied about that too. That in truth, she never really knew who the father was. But she wrote that I was the only one who'd ever truly been his dad. That biology didn't matter. That he was mine, if not in blood, then in everything that actually counted. A part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to burn the letter. But I didn't do either. I folded it gently and placed it in Mason's baby book. Not as proof. Not even as closure. But as a reminder. A reminder that truth is a choice. And this time, I was the one choosing it. Later that evening, I watched from the porch as the kids ran circles around the backyard. Lily chased Mason with a water balloon the size of her head. He let her catch him, collapsing in mock defeat. Their laughter echoed across the fence line, tangled with the scent of cut grass and evening light. I sat there with a mug of coffee, the sky turning to gold above me, and realized something strange. I felt peace. Not victory. Not triumph. Just peace. Because for the first time in a very long time, the war was over. And I was home.